Yes, okay. Basting.
Here.
Bush.
Here.
Chambers.
Here.
Dahl.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
Lindsay.
Here.
Stefas.
Here.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Joelle, did anybody sign up?
Yeah, we have two. We have
Okay.
Lisa Hay and Maggie Packer.
Okay, Lisa, do you want to go first?
Sure. It's some time today, so I wrote down my thoughts. I'm here to express my opinion regarding the possibility of having another referendum. As you explained at the last meeting, this would be to have an additional referendum for $18 million to build a new elementary school here at the high school. Not only am I opposed to building a whole new school up here, but I feel that you have an obligation to follow through on the referendum that just passed. If you go with the new referendum, you're basically undoing a year's worth of work. The Elementary School Planning Committee, which I think Maggie will go into in further detail, had a team of 12 community members and teachers. They met for several months, spent many, many hours, and thoroughly evaluated all of the options, including building a whole new school. But instead, they made a recommendation to you to renovate and add on to the existing elementary school. They made this recommendation in May, and you had this on the agenda and up for discussion May, June, July, and August. And then in August, you approved it, and there was the question on the ballot. And the people turned out in November in record numbers and approved the referendum. Do not undo what it took a year for you to accomplish. Do not betray the public's trust. You asked us to question, and we said yes. Now it's time for you to get it done. That being said, I think you should take a month or so to make sure that you have the right team in place. Have an engineer come in and evaluate the need for shoring up the foundation at the elementary school. I remember at the charrette, there was a comment made that they couldn't make a formal opinion, that a licensed structural engineer would need to come in and evaluate the situation. So you need to find out, is this a $2 million fix or can it be done for less? Once you know the answer to that, then solicit proposals and bids. I think it's important that this be opened up to bids, not just for the subcontractors, but for the general contractor and the architect. The time is right to do this. You only have conceptual drawings at this point. Once you get the finalists, the contractor and the architect, you should check their credentials. Make phone calls. Call up board members for other school districts that they've worked in. It's important that you get a builder and an architect that you're all comfortable with and that you can all trust, that we can all trust, especially in light of the magnitude of this project. Also, I think you should take a look, if you haven't already, at the policies in the 900 series. These are school board policies that exist, but they have not been updated since 2002. This portion of the board policies, you could probably get a whole new set from WASB that's current, that's up to date. I don't think this would take a lot of time, and it will help you going forward. It makes me uneasy when I see that you are suspending policies left and right without having other policies in place that will help you. So thanks for listening. You have the authority right now. Indeed, I think you have a mandate to make a beautiful new addition to our elementary school that's going to be awesome. Now is the time to get it done. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Maggie?
A lot of what I was going to say, Lisa already said. I'm not going to echo it too much. I don't have too much redundancy, but there are a few points that I wanted to speak to based on the last couple meetings that I watched on the internet. One is that we did get a lot of feedback. I know that the survey results were sort of downplayed in the last couple meetings, but 365 results was a sizable result when you compare it to the overall number of voters, was around 18%, which is a statistically significant number of respondents for that type of survey, one that goes out to the public without a captured audience. Within those surveys, during the design charrette and throughout the whole process, we had a lot of feedback about whether to build the school up here or down or do renovations. I personally may have opinions about what, timelines that might go into building, the costs, but my personal opinion was not a part of this process. What was important was hearing community feedback. And what we heard is that people did not like the idea of having young kids near the older kids on the similar campus. They did not like the idea of abandoning a building that had really great bones, especially if we can resolve the foundation question, which, we should just have an answer on that. So it's no longer a question, to Lisa's point. We also had a lot of feedback that using buildings, repurposing buildings, renovating buildings is a really important part of the Mineral Point community. It's something that the community has done over and over again, and it's an integral part of who we are as a place. We also had a ton of feedback. People love the proximity to downtown, that it's inside neighborhoods, and that it's right next to the Prairie Oak Savannah. So I know that after an event occurs, you're gonna get a lot of feedback from individuals who are dissatisfied with something, but you're always gonna hear more from dissatisfied parties than from satisfied parties. And having a 8 percentage point spread positive for a referendum passing is a huge voice that cannot be ignored. And I think that going to referendum, again, would be extremely confusing and disheartening to the community. I also think that the amount of time that it would add to the overall process would be, if you're worried about financials, would be detrimental to the overall cost, because costs only go up. They go up over time, and they go up as a project is lengthened. I also wanted to speak specifically to FEH. I know that I support the board doing due diligence and finding out all the information they can in order to spend money wisely. But personally, and I'm speaking personally now, my experience with FEH has been fantastic. They have been absolutely super professional. They were always on time and responsive with information, which I think in industry, I'm saying positive thing, but in the industry of building, it can be tricky to stay big enough and stay I'm here, pay attention to me. And we were always, getting feedback right away if we needed it from FEH. In addition to that, I would say that the money that's been spent so far is not immaterial. They were able to provide facility assessments, space needs evaluation. They did a 2-day charrette. And I think most importantly, perhaps, they got us to this point. They walked our community, the board, the committee, and the community as a whole to a yes vote in November. And that is a significant, tangible asset that they have brought to this point. And I think that shouldn't be neglected either. Again, due diligence is fantastic. I fully support that, but I wanted to just share that bit of information too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else wants to speak? Okay, thank you. So we're gonna move on into informational items. Discussion, future referendum options for a new elementary school. What do you think?
At the last meeting, this was discussed, Lisa and Maggie. Of the 8%, the difference in the turn, or the yes and no of the original referendum, do you think it would have been the same if they would have had a choice between a remodel and a new school, if that were on the ballot, I guess? The opinions I've been getting overwhelmingly would say, why would we spend 11.9 down there if we didn't know that 18 million up here for a new school was even an option.
Are you asking, is that recall?
Yeah, that's what I'm going with, is your 8% difference.
Yeah. We had the feedback during the process that we went through last year, that there were people who would support a remodel but would not support a new build. There also in their survey was communicated a tax tolerance that would support an $11 to $12.5 million project, but there was not support for an $18 million project, regardless of whether it's a new build or remodel.
Was it even given a fair shake though, Meg?
I believe that it was. Honestly, our committee originally, I think there were a lot of people who thought that a new build would be the best answer, and it was through the process and getting community feedback that the answer per the community shook out.
And we haven't even touched on the advantages of combining the two buildings out here.
We touched on that advantage and disadvantages a lot during the process. We explored that thoroughly. And that was also one of the options that was given during the design charrette.
Did you acknowledge?
Yeah,
On a
all the plans
annual
had dollars
basis.
attached.
And what was the savings? Do you remember
The savings for building a new building attached to the school versus building a new building not attached to the school was not significant.
I'm talking operating, I guess, this annual operating cost.
Again, the operating costs, I do remember there was a question, there was not a lot of operating cost overlap that was identified because the elementary school would still have to operate as an independent entity. That there were some, like, maybe the nurse wouldn't have to drive back and forth, maybe a psychologist wouldn't have to drive back and forth, but the potential costs that we thought would occur by having them attached did not shake out when the numbers were actually applied. At least that's my memory.
Yeah, and I don't remember going into a ton of detail on the operational side specifically with regards to the savings. I know some of the things that we had thought about were like lunchrooms and some of those types of things. But I would agree with Maggie. So personally, I really thought we were headed in a direction for our new school. When I started being a part of the process and having those conversations. But after sitting through the information, listening to what the community told us, I really feel like if you were to go back and ask, that you would get the same results that you got this time. And I realize you're hearing from some folks, but based on the feedback we received, that's not the direction. And my own personal opinion is, to be fair, is different than what's on the table. But that's okay, that's part of the process, and I think that builds in more value into what it brings, because the committee was very open to what the community was telling them.
I agree with her, because if you remember the vote, we barely pushed it across to get the 11.9. It was voted 4-3. I originally thought we should have a new school up here, and I thought, well, I better compromise, because what they've shown us is the public would support this other option instead of a new school, despite what have been my preconceived notion of saving energy costs, busing costs, maintenance costs and things. I think we then barely got that passed to put that to the electorate, and now the electorate have said, yes, I don't see how we can change direction. I think this is what they're committed to. I am concerned if you drop this, it sends a very confused message, and then if we go for the 18, it could very well be defeated, because that's quite a leap in pricing. This has been approved.
But this referendum that's passed out does not disappear.
Oh, no, it doesn't
If we-
disappear, I
if we
understand.
decide- if we
But
did
how does
decide
that
to
make
go-
us look as, I mean, I'm not worried about how we
We're-
look, but.
We look pretty bad.
But
We
the
didn't
public
do
has spoken.
the work that we should have done on this.
Yeah, well,
Because the board never put their 2 cents in on this actually, but
we spent a lot of time discussing the options, I know that.
The thing I'm concerned about, we'll discuss it later, is, I went through the elementary about a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, I can't remember. And I'm just concerned structurally with more of the, I call it the new addition. It's the part that was added on to the old building. I'm more concerned with that structural. I would like to have that structural engineer come in and evaluate that and see what that's gonna cost and see if we do renovate that area, is that gonna support, or are we gonna be here 7 years from now with heaved floors and cracks in the ceiling? That's what I wanna do before I decide to go to another referendum or even to continue this referendum. Because if we have if it's unstructurally sound, or it's gonna cost $6 million to make it structurally sound, we have to look at that.
And that number was built into FEH's plan. They always knew, they identified the bowing and the cracks and all of this stuff. And they've also had projects that have had, you know, I mean, this is not their first time.
But we've never had a structural engineer go through
And I think
it.
it'd be really good for the board to bring in someone tomorrow, because this has been the, well, what if, for the last 2 years.
I mean, that's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah,
because-
absolutely.
I mean, when I went through that, I went to school there, I was in the old building. I always remember it sparkling and shining through that second class through there. But I was like, I felt really bad when I went there, because it was in poor shape, especially that new part. And so I just worry about the foundation, that's the big thing.
And if we do go down the road of remodeling, which you're right, that's on the table, it's been passed as a referendum. Lisa, I couldn't agree with you more. Let's make sure we get the most out of our 11.9 million and do it right.
Okay, I think we can move on then. Any other comments?
Just for information, I talked with Lisa Voisin, who presented to the board on the current referendum and what it would do to the mill rate. If you were to go for an $18 million referendum and it were successful, it would drive the overall mill rate up to $2.80 over its current level.
That's including the current remodel referendum?
No.
Or minus?
That's additional.
You take it over the 17-18 base year, we have an energy efficiency project out there, so that was a 43-cent increase there. So the mill rate on the debt, the $18 million debt, would be an additional $2.37. So for $6 million more, it's another 70 cents.
Okay.
I guess I'm curious what our intent moving forward is, because we still have somewhat of a timeline. We still have a June start date on our current project. And are we going to attempt action at this as this discussion? I mean, not tonight, but when we have scheduled for December bond resolutions to issue debt for the current referendum. So I have no issue moving on, I just don't know what.
Well, it's important to know,
Just throwing
because
things around, or?
interest rates may change, you know, and the sooner we float the bonds out, probably the better the interest rate will get.
And again, I think we need to get that engineer down there to look at that foundation, number one. But, you know, and if they say, oh, that's a problem, it's gonna be whatever, then we can go back, you know, and look at this referendum thing. Right now, we're kind of putting the cart before the horse, because we don't know what that foundation is gonna be like. So let's get the foundation situation under control, and then go back, oh, do we need a referendum, do we need an advisory committee?
I was asked to reach out, go back and what was done and when was it done. Back in 2007, STS Consultants gave a price of around $13,000 to come out and investigate what the issue was going on. They are no longer in business. Roger Paulskill knows the gentleman that used to work there. He's reached out to that individual. I've contacted MP Squared, which is a structural engineering firm out of the Madison area. They gave a ballpark price of between $12,000 to $15,000 to come out and do this. They would work with a geotech company, and the gentleman told me today the name of it. It was a series of letters, and sorry, in education, that's all we are is letters, so I don't remember what those 3 letters were. A timeline would be, if I were to call him tomorrow and say, we want you to go, come out here, do your tests, whatever, he said it would probably be about 6 to 7 weeks before we would get information back as to what would need to take place. And then it would be a matter of, okay, then you schedule another company to come and do that work.
I'm just curious, didn't FEH kind of build in their budget these contingencies? I thought they did.
We did, we talked directly with our structural engineer that we have in-house.
Yeah,
We came up with a hefty, well, I mean, in our mind, a healthy budget
yeah,
number
padded
that we
numbers, so
included in all of our renovation costs for this mitigation project. So we do have it included in the conceptual budgets that we received.
But it wasn't actually done, it's just kind of a educated guess, basically, of what.
Based on our structural engineer's past experience and kind of what his typical recommendation would be pending further review.
And what's that figure?
I can get that to you if you can hold on 1 second or move on.
I just want this.
Well, I think that if we decide to get the assessment done separately, my question was whether a similar assessment is budgeted for in the current project. I would assume yes, before any kind of builder or demo or contractor goes in there. And then my question would be, how much would be budgeted for that assessment? Is it comparable to the quote you got? And then, I'd be interested in hearing if any other firms have a better timeline for a turnaround on it. At least an estimate, maybe without bidding out the work. I don't know, what do you think, Nate?
I'm with you. I know we've got some local engineering companies too that might be able to get us a faster turnaround time, but I mean, I agree with Tony 100% back on that. And kind of what you're saying, it'd be nice to see what's built in as far as getting that done before we make any decisions, because like he's saying, it could be crazy, but yeah, I'm with you as far as maybe, have you reached out to any other ones or just the MP squared?
There were a couple of them. MP Squared is the only one that has gotten back in touch with me. And according to him, he said that, for him and their firm, this is a better time of year to be able to start something earlier. But whatever geotech company would have to come, that might be where the holdup is, because they're gonna come out and do the borings, and they're going to have to do that study, and then they go back and write their reports and make their recommendations. And basically, 6 to 7 weeks comes back and says, here's what we feel the scope of the project should be. And then you would give that information out for anybody to bid, to come back to fix whatever they've determined to be that.
Mitch, it's a sequential thing between those 2 engineering firms there, because you have to have the soil borings and the report on the condition of the soil to support the structure before the structural engineer can do his analysis on what kind of structure can then go on that soil. So that's what drives the timeline a little bit.
Good, thank you.
There's 2 in a row.
We do have the existing geotechnical information for the building. It's sitting on my desk.
That's what Roger had provided.
Yeah, Roger had provided that, so, the school does have that information.
Does MP Squared know that?
No,
That may impact their number, I can't say.
For-
When was it done, do you know?
The geotechnical work, it was done when the previous edition was done, so it's pretty old, but it's still, the soil is still there, so I'm sorry, I don't know the year.
according to MP Squared, they felt that the geotech piece would be somewhere in that $6,000. That'd be probably the top of the range for their piece of this.
But if we have that information already, we may save time and money.
Correct.
Is that my understanding?
Or it may reduce the number of bores that you would need, so that 6,000 would get smaller, but that it would complement what information you currently have.
Where were the other ones located? Addison, Dubuque areas?
Yes, yeah, I think the other one was out of the Dubuque area. And it's tough. You know, you'd asked me to check some other architect firms for, do you have base design costs? And of course, you can imagine what the response was. Yeah, we'd be more than interested in your project, but as far as a base cost, we don't necessarily have something that's a standard cost that we give for every building. You know, so it's a matter of we need to come out, we need to take a look at, you know, the time to come out and do those things. So there were no real answers from any firms that I've reached out to. I reached out to a couple that you've given me as well. I did call some other school districts and I shared whatever information I'd gotten from other school districts. Because they've already done some kind of a project or in the process of a project, so.
Well, we really can't do anything until we figure out this engineering thing. I mean, to keep the ball, I mean, what can we do to keep the ball rolling? That's kind of the biggest question, because we have to get this done, regardless who does the work. If FEH and Kramer does it, we still have to get it done. They can't start anything until, so whether we're 6 or 7 weeks out or whatever it is, we have to do it.
I'm sorry, I don't understand. Can you repeat?
The engineering, we have to get that, regardless if you guys come in, you guys have to do the same steps.
So we would either do it as part of the scope of our project, or it would be done independently, yes.
But regardless, it has to be done before, you know, Kramer's or whoever comes in and you guys come in. That's the first step.
I guess if FEH were hired to move forward with the project, we would simply do it in-house. And it would be part of the design process, and we would do it first, but the other parts would move concurrently with it instead of waiting for it.
What would your timeline be for that?
I can't speak for the engineers. I think we could do a little better than the 6 to 7 weeks, but I don't really want to speak for the structural engineers without them being present.
And I guess I would look at this and say, if it's built into the referendum monies, in my opinion, if FEH and their structural group does it, or it's MP squared or whoever, the money's still gonna come out of that referendum pot of money to do this project.
Right.
Correct. Well,
And it's not a yes, no in terms of whether you can build the building on that site, because you can. It's just a question of what dollars will it take to beef up the structure and/or dig out and improve the soils if that's necessary, or whatever the case may be. So it's not going to be an answer that comes back and says you can't build on that site. The answer is going to be, yes, you can build on that site, but here's what needs to be done to do so.
I think the both of, sorry, go ahead.
In the current makeup of the dollars of the referendum, we had 2 million in that for the structure, Christie?
No, I do not believe it was that high. I think that was for the renovation piece.
Okay.
We were planning on mud-jacking the slab and kind of infilling underneath it with a structural foam or some sort of structural element. But we weren't anticipating that it would be $2 million to do that. I have the booklet of the different options that we put together, but I'm sorry, I don't have that line item pulled out.
That was part of one of the pieces,
It was part
when
of,
it was split out.
it's part of renovating the main floor structure. So when we're talking about the existing space, the $2 million is the number I also remember, but it was to remodel like that whole downstairs area, is my understanding.
I think that was the minimum required for the ADA, the 2 million plus the structural deficits.
Potentially, so
Larry's
if
right,
we use that.
I've got it here.
That's accurate. We had, depending on which budget we're looking
It's
at,
broken
right? So I'm
down.
looking at the C2 budget here. We had 2.3 million for major first floor renovations. So that would include the stabilization of the first floor and the major renovation components that went along with that to kind of redo the classroom elements as were shown on the sketch.
the belief is when the addition was put in, it was built over a base of clay, and at the time, building codes said, yeah, you can certainly build there, and that is compacted and settled. And that's the belief right now, that's the reason for the floor shift. And the thought is also that it's not going to compact any more than it already has, but still, those things need to take place in order to be sure.
There's no mine shaft. I'm not kidding. I had one house with them sitting on a mine shaft.
Well, in that pasture, there's at
There's
least one.
I know one real close there.
Yeah.
I think to these points here, I mean, I'm not totally sure we can wait 7 weeks for a structural assessment and then go to bid and wait another 2, 3, 4 weeks and then get started on designing. I think that, for example, if FEH were to start now, they would be designing, doing schematics, drawings, conceptual stuff while the structural assessment's going on, right? So I think those can be simultaneous activities. So, I guess what I'm getting at is if we wanted to go to bid on the design firm now, I think we could do that and then have the project still include a structural assessment, with everyone's bids. I mean, with the whole project, we're really just bidding out the design, not the structural now that I'm thinking through it, not the structural assessment, not the, the other construction, building, et cetera. It's really the design costs. I don't know, I'm not sure if some design firms would contract out for the structural assessment or what, but in the request for proposal we had, that would need to be included, as part of the evaluation of the site before we start breaking ground. So I guess what I'm saying is, I know that there's already a bid out there, but, we could entertain new bids now, either simultaneously while we arrange our own structural assessment by whoever we want, or by, if we pick a design firm in 2 weeks, have them arrange it. Does that make a lot of sense for us moving forward in a timeline, or?
I don't see how that'll be effective because Mitch has said he's reached out to a few and they haven't gotten back to him. I don't know how you quickly go out and say to a bunch of design firms, please come back to us in 2 to 3 weeks and do this. And then on top of that, add another 6 to 7 weeks, then you're out 2 months. As much as we have to be fiscally responsible, I think FEH is to fulfill all the things that you've asked or we've asked. I think we should give them this job. And I think we've spent good money and they've also in good faith done what they've been asked to do. And it's unfair to them because they've already released their numbers. It's like, how do you put that out to bid when theirs is already so open? It's like, gosh, if I come in with $50 less than them, that's not really fair. I know probably where the thing, if you want to go back in time, maybe it should have been bid out originally and then a contract awarded. But we're this far along, we've done this much work. I say let them go ahead, get on with it. As far as the other requirement, as the general contractor, that is still open to put out to bid.
Right.
I think FEH is, by design, has it. I just personally, I can't see spending another
We can
2 months.
move that up in the action items. Do you want to make that a motion?
I'd be more than happy to make that a motion that we award this contract to FEH for the design of remodeled elementary school.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
The reason I asked that question, I think you make a great point, Everett, and I don't necessarily disagree, but I think I think at this point, I would feel comfortable entertaining design fee bids on the project as it currently stands, assuming the current estimate of the structural adjustments needed for the foundation. And just seeing what we get, knowing that FEH comes well recommended, that they're already on board, there are some, a lot of intangible advantages there. And if their bid's even close to competitive, I think that they have those already advantages. That's just what I'll say, that I still think that we may not have time to do a structural assessment first and then revisit the whole cost of the project and then the design out, but I do think we have time to.
Well, that sounds like a new motion. It's kind of in my mind, you've got one motion with the first and second. If that's part of the discussion, I'm not sure, because it sounds like another motion to maybe still consider bids, and I think we haven't acted on this motion.
Right.
This is
The reason why I'm making that comment is if I happen to vote down this motion, that might be where I'm coming from.
Okay.
I understand. I'm gonna say what I said last meeting. When you read through the email that we saw, and Luke basically had a gentleman's agreement with FEH. And, we've burned other companies on this school board. And I'll tell you what, there's gonna be a time when people aren't even gonna bid on us, because they're gonna, well, they might just tell us we're no good and we're gonna go away. And I think, I'll say it again, it's morally and ethically wrong to not award this contract to FEH.
I will, if I can say something too, and I told Mitch this, I helped him reach out to a couple architectural firms, one that I have a relationship with my school PR vice presidency. And there is, with the record number of referenda throughout the state, people aren't really looking for a lot of work right now. I'm just saying that because I'm not sure what kind of bids we're gonna get on this with the tight timeline, knowing that the resolution would have to be fulfilled by January 22nd for a new, if you end up going that route, whatever, it's a very tight timeline. I'm not saying not to bid it out, I'm just saying that it's a different landscape right now, given the record number of referenda throughout the state. So I heard that from one firm who was unsure if they would bid.
I will not be voting in favor of that motion either, Doc. I think that, we talked about being morally right here. We suspended a policy at the last meeting, and now you're asking us to suspend another policy? I mean, should we throw them all out, I guess? That's the question I have.
Were we suspending the policy to?
We have under action items number 1 up there. I mean, there's.
That isn't for FEH, that's for over $100,000. Mitch, am I wrong?
What's that?
Isn't that number 1 for $100,000, everything over $100,000 or something?
If we approve FEH tonight, we have to suspend that policy.
Correct.
Yes, correct.
But I'm just saying, it was already done by Luke. Just because he's not here doesn't mean we don't have to honor that request. That's what I'm saying. That's my opinion, just giving it to you.
So you're gonna take the word of Luke over the 2,000 and some taxpayers in this community?
No, I don't think I'm taking.
Sure,
Luke
sounds
over
like
the word
you are.
on that. They've done everything for us we've asked. They've done it well. The last time I asked, is there anything that they didn't do well or we didn't like? Nobody said a word. It was in that email that Luke emailed, and he said, it was a gentleman's agreement on a shake of a hand that FEH would be awarded this contract. If I'm gonna shake
One man's opinion.
if I'm gonna shake Nate's hand, and he's gonna build me a house, I'm gonna expect him to do that.
That's terrible, terrible business.
No, it isn't.
Absolutely
Because,
horrible.
you know what, but he said it, Larry.
I would say conversely, it's horrible business to give a subcontractor your word, you're gonna hire them, let them do a bunch of the work up front.
In a
and then-
public setting,
Larry, I'm not the one that did it. I wasn't on board.
unbelievable,
I wasn't on the board when that happened.
unbelievable.
You're suspending policies from the decisions you made 4 months ago.
I'm in the same spot. I think, dealing with Kevin long enough, I think he has some business acumen. I don't think there's any way he makes these budgets, full project budgets, including his fee, public for us, unless he's already gotten assurances that the end project would be theirs. I think we also have to consider We didn't take any sealed bids for the roof. We didn't take any sealed bids for the front entrance project.
Well, I think the roof
Oh,
was
no,
sealed.
no. We had open bids for the roofing work.
But we didn't take them prior to that. You did.
No, and you were invited to be a part of that.
Right, but to hire the company in charge of the $500,000 project.
Was that
That's us.
Right,
Yep,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And we
I
didn't-
just wanted to clarify that there
No, I'm not
there
saying.
were bids
right,
taken on the
No,
roofing.
there was absolutely
Yeah.
sealed bids.
Okay,
I'm saying for the overall
for the overall project.
project,
No.
we did not.
It didn't fall under the
That's not
state
the-
requirements, so the FEH's fee was not over 100,000 on that project.
I mean, there certainly was portions of the project over 100,000.
Well, of course, but FEH's fee was not, and that's what we're talking about here tonight.
Well, I'm just talking the general precedent that was set with those two projects. I mean, Midwest was over 200,000.
Yeah,
We just
and they
set-
bid it
We
on
just
that.
set a number to the project and said go.
I don't follow you.
We set the number at 500,000
And then,
to FEH,
and then through FEH
through
and
Kramer, and
Greg,
said,
they bid out the project.
right, but we did not bid the project out, is what I'm saying.
They did it for us.
We didn't bid,
No,
we
no,
didn't
not
bid
the
Kramer.
original overall contract was not bid out, you know, the sum total thing. They bid out the portions of it, but what he's saying is the overall contract was never bid out. And that was well over 100,000. These 500 and some thousand was never bid out.
That's all I'm saying, is the
Yeah, I see what
precedent, the
you're saying,
precedent has
yeah.
been set without spending
So the
policy on an
precedent doesn't
overall
happen there.
project. We just did it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Okay, we're gonna call the question.
Can you read the motion, Angie?
To award contract to FEH as architect.
And how much was that fee again?
760, right around there, I believe.
I think it was 63 or something.
760.
Don't you think we should approve the suspension of the policy before we approve this motion? Order. Without one, we can't do this.
It was 60. Yeah.
We have to do one first.
If, I guess, if you believe that there was an agreement prior, and you're awarding the contract, then I guess you're just making it official. If you don't believe that, then we would certainly need number one under action items.
Tony had said that. Is that your understanding?
It is, yes. I will speak from experience. If you make a verbal contract in the state of Wisconsin, you can be sued if you break that contract verbally. You're to give a written notice of termination of even verbal
I have a problem, Doc,
contracts.
is the superintendent did it without board approval.
I understand that, but I'm talking about generalities.
I get where you're coming
I've been through this. In a court of law, they recognize a verbal contract, a handshake, and if you don't give a 30-day notice of termination of that agreement, you're in violation of the law of the contract, especially if it's witnessed. Now, I don't know if Luke was witnessed or not, but it's certainly written down. And, but I can tell you, been there, done that, and the judge told me, no, you've got to follow through the commitment here, okay?
So if that, I guess that's the belief.
That's my
I'm
knowledge.
making the
Let's
motion.
call the question.
Lindsay,
Yes.
Stefas,
No.
Bush,
Yes.
Chambers,
No.
Dahl,
Yes.
Dunn,
No.
Basting.
No.
Motion fails.
Okay, where do we go from here?
Well, there's been a lot of discussion about seeking bids for the design portion of the project.
Is that up for discussion? Because I would like to set a time limit on that, except because we can't let this go on for months and months. Does anybody have an idea about time limit on that?
Christie, if you were walking into a new building, what kind of a time frame would you need to lay out a design and put a bid together?
Well, I think if you send out an RFP for the designers, they would have the referendum information that they could reference. So it depends if you want to do a fee-based selection or a qualification-based selection. Given the fact that our fee is out there, a qualification-based selection might be in order where you would request their qualifications and then in a separate envelope, if you so choose, or somehow submitted with a separate fee for the overall project. So we have facilitated design RFPs in the past and can send you an example or two if you would like, similar to what we did for the construction manager portion. And then if we are allowed to submit, we would do that.
Well, what would you boil down as an average time?
Oh, I apologize, I forgot that.
I think that was the question.
Yes, I would say that 2 to 3 weeks from, probably 2 weeks from when you would issue the RFP would be in order to submit something. I mean, we've done
2 or 3
faster.
weeks ago?
I would think if you could get it issued then in 2 weeks, you could have a response.
As we can provide you some input there, we have clients who have come to us and asked us to solicit RFPs for architects for projects. So I'd be happy to provide the board and the district our advice on that.
Thank you, Greg. What, I reached out to Bob Butler, so the packet that you have is basically some information that Bob Butler sent to me. I asked him if we were to be going out to an RFP for architects, and this is the information he sent me, so I just copied it and provided that information to you as well. It would require another meeting then in order for us to get official language put together to go to RFP, and then you would be looking at that 2 to 3 week window after that language has been decided.
How long do you think it'd take to put something like this together? With these templates and knowing the current estimated budget we already have, you know, proposed design that was in the referendum, expected timeline. Would you, I mean,
A week?
I don't wanna put it all on you, Mitch, maybe, you know, maybe operations committee can put it together. Do we wanna contract with a firm to help us draft an RFP?
Well, I would certainly be reaching out to anywhere
Right.
to get advice moving forward.
Just the guidance of Greg.
CISA might be another option for
Jamie
advice.
Nutter down at CISA 3 would be a great resource as well. So I would say, you know, a week to try to get language carved out to bring back to take a look at.
Now, along with that, we talked quite a bit about the soil borings at the elementary school and an assessment on the structure. Maybe we could dig into that a little bit more too, Mitch, and see if that would speed the process up, if we can use them borings that we already have.
The question on those borings, Larry, is going to be the placement of where the holes were dug and how that aligns with the proposed addition. Because if those borings that were done in that old report are not in key locations, like where foundation walls go and things like that, there's not gonna be enough information there, and you're gonna have to do it. Now, to Christie's point, there may be some borings that are usable, depending upon the location, so it all depends upon where those punches in the ground were made, so to speak, versus where the proposed new addition is going to be.
Right.
There should be some level of savings from that old information, but My advice to you would be, I would not make a decision based upon that hold of soil information all in of itself, because those borings can't be done in the key spots where the building is gonna be done. And that's where you need it.
Just to be sensitive to the timeline of this project, and maybe we need to first figure out the existing structure and the ground underneath that, whether we can use them borings or if we have to do new borings. At some point, we're gonna have to do a new regrade.
Yeah, you're gonna have soil information.
If we do it now or a month from now, does it matter?
No, it doesn't. One of the first things we always do is suggest that the client get their soil, because that's a separate contract that you always carry yourself, get that soil boring information done.
I have another question for Christie. So FEH has the ability to do that structural assessment in-house, is that correct? Is that fairly common for design firms to have those services available?
A lot of design firms will have structural engineers, and then some other ones will actually have MEP engineers in-house. But architecture and structure usually go together very nicely, so oftentimes they're paired.
The larger the firm, the more typical it is to have structural in their scope.
Okay.
Smaller the firm, less likely.
I'm wondering if in the RFP, if we decide we want to submit one for bids, why don't we just include that as part of the request, that a structural assessment be done by whoever wins the bid? That can be as one, as part of one of the,
Yeah, instead of separating them out.
Right.
instead of separating them out.
Of the existing structure and the anticipated location of the new structure.
Right.
Identity.
If I may, then you'll just want to clarify if the borings would be done by the school district or if they would be part of the scope of the proposal. Just because typically it's a school district provided thing that the designer would send out an RFP on the school district's behalf to get a quote for those borings, but that the agreement would be with the school district. So it's just, I think that's a point of clarification that you would want to.
That's to that geotech company, right, that does those borings?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you do the evaluation, who's doing that geotechnical
Right.
piece? Is it the school district, independent, or is it part of the scope?
So if I understand correctly, you're asking me to get language crafted together for an architect design firm that would have the ability to take care of the structural engineering capacity to do those borings. That's part of the RFP language. So you're looking at a week to get the language together, then 2-week window for the bid process. Then you would review those bids, and then you would actually look at, this is the company we're awarding this to, and then they would start doing their soil borings. So you're actually pushing that back, I would say a minimum of at least 3 weeks. You're pushing that opportunity back, if I understand what you're asking right now.
That's a good catch, Mitch.
I don't see a better way unless, do you guys feel like with the frost hitting and all of that, that's a huge deal?
They do soil boring
Okay,
year-round.
okay, what's your comment?
Yeah, I would suggest that you, given what you've decided to do tonight, go forward with the selection of a firm to do soil borings for you, because that's going to be a direct contract that the district holds. And if you issue your RFP to describe the structural issues that need to be addressed in the existing building, then make that a part of your RFP. That just helps those firms be aware of what FEH already knows, which is there are structural issues in the existing building and on the site.
I think that's a good suggestion, that
Okay.
we basically work with Roger to contract with someone to get those borings updated so that they sync with the current plans of the project. And then whoever we get to design and do a structural assessment, they would have the borings that we obtained through whoever, eventually,
Typically, if
to
an
make the
RFP is
recommendation.
issued for architectural services for a school project, it's early enough in the process that you'll already make a decision whether it's qualifications-based or fee-based. And then once you have that architect on your team, and you have your contractor on your team, then you usually make the decision to go forward, have the soil borings done and get that done. So it usually isn't part of the RFP that's issued to the architect, usually. So that's why I'm suggesting that, and it's because it's a direct contract, and it's typically a $4,000 to $6,000 number, and the good news is that you have some design work to know where the footprint of that addition is going to be, so that you can strategically place those borings to get you the information that you need to have a structural engineer evaluate.
And that would be based on using FEH's design.
You have to use the charrette sketch in order to tell them where the borings would go.
If you have another architect firm come in and say, well, here is our suggestion for design for 3 classrooms and gymnasium and office space, they may orient that building differently, so the footers would be put in a different location. And you know, if we're ordering up the soil borings to be done and the testing to be done, and then a different architect design firm is awarded the contract, we may be doing it again.
Well, so let me just ask a dumb question. So, when an RFP goes out to a design firm, are we expecting a proposed design of the project?
Typically, when you request a proposal, you request the qualifications
Yeah.
to show that you have similar experience,
Right.
and then you request a fee. And then once you have the designer on board, they would come up with a preliminary design.
Right, once
and
they're
then
on board.
That's usually used to then solicit borings
Okay.
in the typical time.
So to back this up, that would have been done prior to any other work that took place. You would have brought in and had an RFP for architect design firms prior to anything else taking place. Then you make your decision there, then you move forward with, here's a design concept, here's a cost. And so that when you're at this point and the referendum was successful, all of that preliminary work was done and in place, and you were ready to go, hit the ground running. Typically, it doesn't happen in this timeline where we had a concept, we had committee studies, we passed a referendum, and now we go and say, okay, now we want somebody to come in and give us a design, tell us how it's going to lay out, tell us what we need to do, and we have, in essence, a $12 million check to spend on this. Hopefully, you can get it all done for this $12 million. So things are kind of out of order, really, how other districts would have done this process in a building referendum question, they'd have done the architect right out of the gate first.
So we can, basically, what could happen is we're gonna pay for these design services all over again. That's already been done. And
You'll
we
just
talk
have,
about saving money, that we're gonna have somebody to go in and, if we don't hire a PH, talk about saving money, but then we're gonna say, oh, no, we wanna have a new design team come in with a lower bid, we're gonna go and do a new design, we're gonna pay for that all over again.
My understanding is if FEH goes forward now, let's say Everett's motion passed, okay? What my understanding is what would happen is that there would be a collaborative process over the next couple months to come up with a finalized design,
correct.
right? So, to your point, you said it's gonna look a lot like the one that passed in the referendum, but there's gonna be a lot of input from staff, and community members, et cetera. And you're just gonna be using, the preliminary information you got and using some of the rough drafts you got. I mean, to me, if we went with a different design firm, and I'm not saying we're going to, but whoever gets the design bid, that's where they're gonna start too, is, okay, we've got a rough schematic from the referendum. Now let's talk to staff, now let's talk to the community, let's do some draft designs, and let's finalize the design by this date, whatever's on your timeline here. Looks like mid-January. And hopefully we won't be too far behind schedule on that. But to your point, Tony, I don't think I'm hoping that this is, the intent is not to do a lot of redundant services here. I think a lot of the pre-referendum work was extremely valuable, and it's ours to use to move forward. And I think we have a good starting point. We have an abundance of community input. We've already got a rough schematic design started. And yes, it may end up different. They may move the main entrance, and maybe we do need to get a few more soil borings by the time it's all said and done. But as far as doing, I don't see us repeating a whole lot of what we paid for pre-referendum.
We'll see.
I mean, if I'm wrong, please clarify.
No, I'm not.
Either someone who's done it before.
If you're gonna get somebody to come in, that's an architect design firm, you tell me if I'm wrong. They can't use a design you developed, right?
You're wrong, we paid for it.
I'm asking her.
I think that does.
Can they, is that our design or is that your design?
You own that design.
We own that
by
design.
By contract.
Okay, so we can use that design.
But I don't know exactly how your contract read, so that's what I would qualify that on.
Yeah, I'd have to check with Kevin on that. I do know that we've got a pretty decent base for starting our design, and that we've had previous discussions with staff and with the planning committee, and so we've got a good basis since we did kind of the initial legwork, so we might be able to be more nimble when we get started instead of the few weeks it will take for a different designer to get brought up to speed.
I just didn't know if you own that design, so they did not start from that design.
I think that regardless of ownership, and that would be part of the contract, I believe that another architecture firm would be reluctant to take that as a starting point. I don't think that they would want to go through their own process.
I mean, we can tell them we don't want them to, but I'm sure they probably would want to do their own design.
They would want their stamp on it in some fashion. It may look very much like the shred sketch, but I would need to talk with Kevin specifically about the ownership of it. I mean, you guys own the work that we've done to date. I just don't know if another architecture firm, if you bring them, you can use the exact same design, but it's easy enough to modify.
Yes, timeline here a little bit. So we're potentially looking at December 3rd for approving an RFP. 2 to 3 weeks for an RFP, which puts us at Christmas. When realistically, because we're not looking at January 10th anymore for 100% schematic design. When realistically is our new date? I mean, I guess my real question is, with a industry average of 5% increase year over year, if we lose this summer, we lose $600,000 worth of project. And the project costs us the same, but prices go up. When do we need to have things done by?
Well,
As you've worked this summer.
Greg's opinion, to answer some of what you have in there, Andy, is that I think you can, if your decision is to move forward and issue an RFP for architectural design, you can save yourself some timeline by simplifying that RFP. Because if you ask for design and budget things to go with that RFP response, it will lengthen the time that's needed to do a response and add to the time frame that you'll need to evaluate those things. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, I'm just saying that's the reality of that, okay? Most of the time, and an RFP for architectural services, if it's based on fees or if it's based on qualifications, is usually relatively simple. And that's what I would suggest that you do. I think, I don't want to speak for anybody in the room, but what I heard was concerns about the structural integrity of the existing building and what the cost may be to build a new addition. That's kind of a separate question. It's kind of a separate issue, okay? So, my advice to the district would be to go through your process to get your team on board, and then have trust and confidence in your team with you to solve your issues. That's what I would suggest.
Yeah.
Because if you solve the issues while you're doing the RFP, it gets to be a fairly complicated process. I think it's important for people to know in the RFP what your existing issues are.
If they pick the architect by February, can they start construction in the summer?
I would say that's very difficult,
So they need to pick it by January?
because you also have to remember that the work, some of the work that you need to do in the existing building has to be done while school's on break. And you can really do an addition anytime, but that whole site is so tight and so complex that Christie can speak to typical design timelines, but I think you're gonna have a very difficult time starting by start of summer.
I think that there might be some small renovation related to MEP systems, but there would be no major renovation of the existing building this summer. And that you wouldn't, it would have to happen next summer.
You have to remember that design work goes through state approval. And so in addition to the time that they need to do their work, get feedback from you and your staff and all the stakeholders in the process, as well as construction input, then you have to take that and get that approved by the state.
By when do they need to figure out who the architect is in order to start this summer?
September.
I
Is
think
it too
you're,
late now?
I think it's either
You're
too
right
late or you're
on that.
dangerously close to it.
This will only be a 2-year project regardless. So the additions could take place next summer, the renovations inside the existing the following summer, Craig. I mean, sounds like that's what you're planning anyhow, if Kramer Brothers were on board.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly until I understand the scope of the work better, but, yeah, I think you're
I
gonna be
think
challenged.
it pushes stuff, it pushes more pieces of the project into, not this summer, but into the next summer, which then would have an impact on your construction costs. Which would make the budget more.
I think you wanna, given what I've learned about your project, you wanna let your design breathe a little bit while you're going through the process so that you know that you're comfortable as a group that your solution is right because the community's watching you. And I think to accelerate that process is a challenge. And I think that's when poor decisions sometimes are made.
I guess
Well
that's,
said, well said. Greg.
that's my concern, I guess, is we're bending over backwards, dotting i's and crossing t's to save percentage points on this or that. And if we bump down a summer, we're potentially looking at, industry average of 5%, which is 600 grand.
Is that a fat rate, 5% on a project like this? If you get materials locked in, whenever it goes out to bid, Andy's comment is not completely true, right?
No, it's a 4 to 6, right now the annualized construction cost increase is a 4 to 6%.
I believe Jason Basting was looking at, the village is looking at doing a garage, a city garage.
Fire department.
And he had reported out that construction costs had gone up 25% from last year to this year. As they're trying to get this put into place, he's seen a 25% increase. So
We wouldn't.
if average is 4 to 6, that's great, but this is a project that the city is looking at.
That's outside the norm though, with the political environment.
Well,
I would say yes.
Sheriff's.
I think the hurricanes and fires and all
Sure.
that
Starting this
all the
summer,
demand, I mean, even the lumber for normal houses has gone
if
up a
we're not
lot,
starting a project until next summer, when would we
aside from politics.
When would we collect bids?
Right, because it's currently looked like June was the second set, and just before the start of So that's the first step.
Yeah, you want to get those bids, Andy, as early as you possibly
Right, I
can.
understand that.
Their design work has to be done in order to do that.
You'd want bids early next calendar
But
year.
a contractor, any subcontractors and suppliers, if you bid stuff to them this summer, are not gonna lock in their price for the following summer.
That's so, I mean,
They're gonna lock in,
comment about getting
yeah.
it locked in early.
I mean, I think the whole, the reason we're spending so much time here, right, is we want to make sure that we're giving the community as good a deal as possible on this huge project, right? So, but we don't want to try to get a good deal at the expense of costly delays that give us a net increased cost in the end, right? So, I mean, I think that's the whole point of this conversation here, is can we get this figured out in time that we don't have costly delays?
And there would be no going back and saying, if we lose $600,000, there's no going back to the community to say, we need 600,000 more.
Right.
It would be going back to the builder saying,
Of the project.
you have to cut out $600,000 worth of stuff within this project in order for us to come in at 11.92. That top dollar stays as is. And, you know, whether it's change orders or we delay the start of the project, we can't say, well, it's gonna now be 12.52 because we've lost 600,000. That 600,000 has to come out of the project itself.
And I mean, my final point is, I think that's a little on the light side, because we're actually talking about 2 summers. I mean, we're talking about this summer, next summer, but this summer actually becomes 2 years from now. You know, it's not
Summer
just
of
a
21,
year.
yeah.
It
I
could be
think-
up to 5% twice, and now you're $1 million behind. Potentially.
We can expedite this RFP process, there's no reason we can't meet later this week, Andy. And we can
No,
tighten
I'm fine with that, as long as we can.
the
start this,
window up.
Which just sounded like would be somewhat difficult. That's my only concern. is we-
Be difficult.
It sounded like, no, it sounded like delaying this 2 or 3 weeks, selecting in early January or whatever, starting the design in early January would be difficult to start this summer, is the answer we just got. That's where my concern lies is.
Greg kind of said we're pushing the beam right now though, so, like Larry's saying, if we expedite it, say, you know, and say, hey, he's let's say we reach out to 2 or 3 other companies, say, hey, if you want in on this, this is, you know, time is of the essence. That way, FBH has kind of got the upper hand on that. So, I mean, and, you know, if you're not interested, just tell us or whatever, maybe.
Right.
And say, hey, we're getting the ball rolling, kind of thing like that. Maybe, did any of those companies ever respond back to you, Mitch?
I got voicemail and an email, and both the companies were interested, but we need to come out and visit, we need more
Kind of
information.
one of those things, okay. Maybe we reach out to them and say, hey, you know, if you wanna maybe jump on board or maybe give us some bids, we're looking sooner than later, I don't know. Just my thoughts on it.
As soon as you get this ready to go, Mitch, Jeff and I have a meeting called in 24 hours.
Yeah.
So,
Can we can include a timeline in the RFP that states we expect construction to start
You should,
in June.
yeah, you should put your timeline in there for design and construction.
Just so everybody's aware.
that's a great point.
Everybody's aware that they're on that time.
Well, and let's give ourselves deadlines. I mean, you know, we should pick a deadline for when this RFP should be returned to us. And then we can have a emergency board meeting to, you know, as soon as, you know, immediately after the deadline, and we can vote right there, you know. There's a timeline there.
There's a
as part of-
timeline.
Yeah, there's a
Yes.
timeline in here. When we sent you the construction manager proposal RFP, we did request that the original design timeline be attached to it, because it does have bearing on their proposal. So a similar timeline for the designer, like what was the previous schedule, should be provided as part of the RFP. We can't use the same one, obviously.
Mhm.
So,
So I can try to have something together for Friday morning. Does Friday morning work for?
Well, do you need the whole board to vote on the RFP language, or is that something
I
that
need at
Jeff
least
can
4.
authorize? Okay,
You need to decide as a board, so I need a quorum, which would require at least 4 of you to be present.
I can make Friday morning.
What time?
7 AM?
Okay.
Okay.
It's important to be really clear about your selection criteria. Like Christie made the statement that she did. From a contractor's perspective, there's a lot of difference in design, and the quality of design, and the timing of design. And those are all really important things.
And are you more interested in, I'm assuming you're more interested in the fee structure of the architect design over the qualifications, or do you want both?
Usually if it's, this is just information again, if it's a purely fee-based proposal, then there are absolute criteria that they have to hit in order to bid. So that way you're taking some of the qualifications and you're making them a given. They have to come to the table with that. Because if I'm Greg's architectural firm out of Belmont, and I don't have any school experience, you know, just because I have the cheapest fee, you shouldn't choose me,
I agree.
right? And if I was your contractor, I'd say, don't hire Greg, he doesn't have any school experience, I'm gonna get terrible drawings, it's gonna delay the project, it's gonna cost us more. Okay, so it's important to have the right criteria in there to make that selection.
And we also need to determine whether we want a fee-based or percentage-based proposal for the fee.
It has to be, doesn't it, Mindy?
What do you mean?
I mean, certainly the board needs to know what the percentage is gonna be.
Well, if you remember the
Well, I'm just saying
conversation
if
earlier,
you're-
if you ask for a percentage, then your architect works harder for you. If it's a dollar amount, if it's, I can put this building together for $700,000, then it doesn't matter. Our interests aren't being represented as well on a straight fee, on a dollar amount versus the percentage. So you would want to know percentage of construction, which is, I think Kevin shared that with us at a couple of meetings.
Understand.
It's not backwards.
It's backwards, the other way, it's the opposite.
The
If it's-
fee-based.
It's fee-based, yeah.
Because they would want to hire
Mm.
total project, not percentage-based. So they wouldn't fight for a cheaper product. I mean,
Yeah,
in
right,
theory,
percentage based, if it
if
costs
they're all
more, they get
ethical,
more.
they would always represent us.
Just as FEH has done for us.
Right.
Correct, yeah. That's what I understand. So fee, qualification and fee based.
You don't have to do 1, you don't have to do 3, and you don't have to do 4 right now. So,
just for a point of clarification, does policy 672 apply in this situation? As far as Because
I would
we're
go,
not really purchasing, I mean, I know it's a contract and I know it's over $100,000. But I just wanna make sure that that policy even applies, so that maybe we don't even have to suspend it, you know, because,
well, you won't be suspending it now, you're asking for RFPs, so you're gonna get bids at this point in time.
It was attached right
oh,
there.
so,
Oh, was it? I'm sorry.
oh, I see. So the policy is that if it's over 100,000, it goes to bid.
Mhm.
So that would be in line with policy.
Mhm.
Got it? Okay, never mind. Second dumb question of the night.
That's good one.
You know, when we talk about the $5,000 piece, it would be similar to, you approved a $200,000 technology budget, and we need a server for $15,000.
That would be included in that budget.
That would be included in that budget, so in essence, you
That was the kind of
approved
the point I
that.
was getting at, but
Right.
it's moot if we're
Right.
So
so
once
bids,
we
all
have
right?
a structural budget in place, we won't have to piecemeal it.
Correct,
Right.
correct.
So we only have to do 3 or 4. Right.
Correct.
So we should go back to informational items.
Do you wanna, I mean, do we need, is this an action item that we need to vote on to request an RFP to go to bid on design?
Policy requires, right, anything over 100,000.
Right, no, but you're asking me to get the language,
Mhm.
so we wouldn't necessarily have any action on it. I'm going to get the language for
Unless
an
we
RFP.
Motion for the language.
And then
Oh,
you
okay.
would make the formal motion to
On
say, yeah,
Friday's meeting?
here's what we're doing, and I approve, make the motion to pass for bids on this.
Okay.
Okay, so let's go back to informational items. By an advisory board to assist us in the referendum project. Number 2. Dr. Ross, speak to this.
Yeah, this was my idea, well, not my idea, but it's something I wanted to put on the agenda. I feel like we're struggling a little bit to figure out exactly what we need to do and how we need to do it and over what timeline. I feel like we've got a lot of people in the community that have experience with construction projects. And some have already stepped forward, being willing to say, I'll help out if you need any help. Reviewing contracts, maybe even getting recommendations, checking references, making sure the timeline makes sense, et cetera. And I think we should take advantage of that and invite some community members who have some experience with this kind of a project to help advise us. It doesn't have to be a big group, and I don't even know exactly who we would invite, and I don't know how we would decide that, but I just want to see if the board is agreeable to construct something like this. I don't know if you'd call it an advisory board or an ad hoc committee or a task force, or I don't know enough about all that language and definitions to know exactly what, but I mean, I think the point is to have it not be some kind of a binding voting type group, but one that stays engaged in the project and can give us recommendations and advice as we move along. And I think getting people who were involved in the planning process and know the details of what it took to get to this point would be helpful, and then also people that are in the industry to kind of be kind of a watchdog for us would be good.
We could have, how did we do that with the safety committee? Did Joel send out like a massive email or something for volunteers, or do we, it's kind of like you said, how do we pick the people? I mean, I already have some in mind, and I'm sure you do too, as far as people to ask if they would.
I think it's simply, if you wanted to put that list together, just from board members, and we could just reach out and say, would you be interested in being a part of something like this? And just start with that.
What if this was led by the operations committee, for example, like say, if Nate and I took the lead, took nominations from other board members of people they think would be good, and then we reach out and see who's interested, and then report back to the board what we came up with.
I support that idea, I think so, I think it's a wonderful idea. It is the community's building, being paid for by the community, and certainly we should have a say in the design and help us through construction.
Do you think this is the best way to do it?
There's loopholes in any way to select a committee, but if the board brings names forward, I think then it puts the board member a little bit more on the spot, people that are knowledgeable, like you said, that they can offer some assistance, and help us. I don't have a problem with what you suggested, or whoever suggested that.
Right, yeah.
Can I interject? Sorry. I would hope any kind of subcommittee would consult with elementary school as a principal. I think that would be wise. We're most familiar with the stakeholders in that.
I think having staff, or even Mr. Renwick on the board would be a nice idea. But yeah, we can consider various stakeholders.
We would take some thought about even having a separate committee made up of staff along with Mr. Renwick. I think would be helpful.
I want to avoid duplicating whatever the design team was gonna,
They're gonna go to staff anyway.
Right.
Design team.
I think, yeah, just even having
we established.
Maggie and Leah right there, they've already done all that. I mean, I think they'd be, a couple huge assets because they have done all that groundwork already. So, just my thoughts on it, we wouldn't necessarily have to get everybody back involved if they've done it, so.
Just in offering feedback from other districts and the
Yeah.
issue that you're kicking around. Different districts have all done it differently, but there's kind of various levels of decision-making in the whole process. From the decisions that the architect would want input from staff on about circulation and flow of students in the building and all those kind of things, to really the highest level decisions about selection of the people on your team, overall budget and schedule approvals and things like that. So some districts have had committees that involve staff and citizens but at a certain level, and usually that's a level below the board. The board's making the high-level decisions, and people who have, maybe it's a retired teacher that has some great input to offer, or staff members that are currently on board that have great input to offer, or whatever the case may be. So, just for consideration, you may want to decide at what level you want to make board decisions, and then at what level do you want to create other decisions. There's oftentimes a building and grounds committee that kind of carries some water about a lot of issues, because your facilities and maintenance people are important people to have input when you're making decisions on mechanical systems and materials and how they wear in a school and things like that, and the architects make the selections. So I think what you're suggesting is a really good idea. I think there's various levels that you need to try to define where do we need certain people's involvement.
I think that's great advice. I mean, maybe, I don't know if we have to define it now necessarily, but maybe if you guys have ideas on what kind of decision-making decision-making ability this group should have, what kind of decisions should they be involved in? How often do you want them to report to the board? Kind of logistic stuff that I'll admit I haven't sorted completely out, but to kind of better define the role of the committee, as we're maybe inviting members. I think that would be helpful, and then maybe Nate and I, we can.
It's not unusual to struggle with it.
What's that?
It's not unusual to
Right.
struggle with, because you're used to making decisions that are most typically well below this big elephant that you now have in the room. So it's time to, it's usually a good time to pause and think about how you want to do that. And you want the community, because you're representing them, to feel very good about that structure of decision-making and support you all the way along the way.
Christie, on the FEH timeline, you mentioned meeting with kindergarten, PE teachers, elementary office staff. Is that kind of I mean, did you have an idea of a set group that you would longitudinally work with during the design project, and is that what you're referring to?
That's a really good question. Essentially, the CPC abbreviation that you see throughout is the core planning committee. And so that was intended to be 2 board members, if there were more members available, elementary school principal, superintendent, buildings and grounds manager, and the design team. That was the core planning committee as, I'm a contractor, yes. As, that's typically what we found to work well throughout the design process. You've got all the interested parties, and then you've got the elementary side with the knowledge base. So the kindergarten PE teachers and elementary office staff, that was a separate staff meeting intended to talk to the staff most impacted by the addition space. So kind of preliminary discussions had already been conducted with the staff members, but that meeting was intended to specifically discuss impact and what they would want in their spaces. So that was kind of a one-off. And then the core planning committee is the one that would oversee the process and use the goals for success to kind of navigate a successful project. Did that help?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. I guess what we need to think about is whether we want some kind of maybe group of community citizens to be either an adjunct to that committee, or I hesitate to say added to that committee, but I also don't want to create a lot of unnecessary layers either.
Is that a motion?
No,
Okay.
I'm just.
I'm trying to sort this through, like, what is gonna be the final thing to direct this thing? Are you gonna make a motion to direct it back to policy, or are you gonna direct it back to operations and say, look to create an advisory board and then just create the subcommittee?
Yeah, and so
Ready to do it?
yeah, so I mean, I think I just want to toss out the idea,
Yeah.
see what everyone thought about it, and then I was hoping to maybe leave the board meeting with at least an action of yes or no, is this gonna be a group that's gonna be helpful to the board? And then maybe spend the next few weeks putting the group together and then maybe defining what the group's roles would be, what level of involvement would they have, what level of decision-making would they have. So, if we think a motion is important to at least appoint a,
It's an action item, so we're not gonna make a motion.
No.
Okay.
But I do
I see.
think that it should go back to the operations committee
and
and
then
you
we'll
guys
we'll
bring something to
propose
us
a
at the
group
Oh,
next
okay.
meeting.
and maybe define
Yeah.
goals and.
And then get some information from everybody, and then we'll talk about it.
That's,
Mm.
so,
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. So my interjection is just that if you decide or determine to create this advisory group, is to have a very specific charge of what you want that group to do. Because if you don't, you're setting both the board up and the advisory group to fail essentially. So I think it's really important to define what you want that group to accomplish, what information you want them together to bring to the table, what types of feedback, so that you can use that to your most advantage, because otherwise, you're adding that extra layer. So I would be very cautious because of with what I do for a living, I do a lot of projects, and so more layers doesn't always necessarily add to being helpful. So, that's my input, is just make sure that it's really clearly defined what you want that group to accomplish if you decide to create one.
Well said.
Jim Cook's still over
So you guys will bring something back to us at the next meeting.
Sure.
I just need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Can we clarify, there's a lot of talk about the structural engineer now, later, whenever, just clarify, we've gone back to the RFP, getting a design in place and then getting borings at that point.
I thought it
Then
was,
having,
to be combined in the bidding process. Although he suggested that we do a separate, so I don't know if we ever decided to separate it out or combine it. I
well,
don't
that's
know.
my question.
It's a good question, I
Do
don't
we
know.
have an answer to you?
I can't answer.
If you're asking them about, the difference is, are you asking them about their capability to address your issue, or are you asking them for a, I don't know, a budget? And realizing that that's a subcomponent of a much bigger,
Yeah.
if
right.
you like, I don't even know the right analogy, but, you know, the structural system is only one component of the entire building project.
Yeah.
And that structural system has impacts on, it's like domino, it impacts different things. So my suggestion, based on your timeline, would be to ask about their experience and capability to address that issue.
I think maybe that's what's gonna be done Friday morning. The RFP will be developed then, but we should have a better idea now.
Right,
Before
but still
Friday.
the timeline,
Yeah,
whether that's included or not,
Yeah.
it sounds like the timeline remains the same, that
yeah,
the design needs to be done, so the borings can be done before we get an answer.
yeah. Sounds like
Just
it.
so we're pretty clear about that, because there was some talk about immediacy.
Right, right.
The process to get to the cost impact of what that may be will take some time. To be
That's
accurate.
the clarification of
So we're gonna put that in the RFP, correct?
Yeah.
That works.
Yeah, I just wanted, it was more the timeline.
Okay, Tony made a motion to adjourn. Dr. Lindsay, I second that, I believe.
I did?
Okay. Sorry, thought I heard.
No.
Is that okay or no?
It's okay.
All right, all those in favor?
Yeah.
Yes.
I-
Then we'll have,
Yeah, that's interesting.